There's a couple of other people from film here as well, James DeVal and Giselle Fried, if you guys would like to come up and introduce you to a few of the other people. So, okay, so the audience like to go first?
I have a few questions and then we'll go into the audience. It was a really fascinating film. When I saw it, I had no idea. I had no idea that this culture even existed. And it was interesting to me because it seemed like it started as almost like a kind of innocuous, teaching guys how to talk to women. It didn't seem so treacherous, and it seems to have devolved into this predatory, misogynistic industry. Can you talk about that evolution and why you think that it went in that direction?
Sure. Would you like to talk about that for a bit?
Yeah, I mean, actually, I think watching the film is really interesting to me because it sort of echoes the journey that I went on with this. So I first came into the industry as a conversation coach, and saw these guys, and you think, oh yeah, this is cool. You just want to help some guys get some skills. There was some other stuff other guys were doing. It mostly seemed ridiculous to me at first. It didn't seem malicious, and then slowly you start to see it unfold, and you see this real dark side. And I saw the industry start to go in a direction, and I left because I didn't like it, and I actually kind of lost touch with it. And I've been off doing my own dating coaching and personal development coaching from a more moral perspective. And I didn't even know half the stuff that went on in the industry until I was asked to be interviewed for the documentary. And then, I wasn't really surprised at all to hear what went on, and I really thought I want to be a part of this and help people understand how slippery a slope it can be from, this little teasing neg into some really, really dark behaviour.
Has there been any support or backlash or anything from women's groups trying to get a hold of this? Have there been any, lawsuits or investigations against these people?
Well, I mean, this is quite interesting. I think the short answer is that I know there are a few pickup artists that have been sued by people that have discovered themselves on YouTube or discovered themselves as part of a product. But strangely, there's been nothing kind of widespread, except for recently in the UK. There was actually there was a pickup artist over there who's recently been imprisoned for, I think it was 2 years, off the back of a BBC documentary, actually. So it does feel like there's a kind of a reckoning coming for some of this behavior. Yeah, but strangely that hasn't happened yet.
Can you just talk to me a little bit about the filmmaking process? Like, how did you come to tell this story?
Sure. So I first stumbled. It was a couple of things. I'd stumbled across a few of the YouTube videos from Julian Blanc, who was the person in the middle of the film that the big scandals are about. And I had a friend who was essentially doing the same job that Minnie used to do, which was be a kind of conversation person at one of the seminars. And that was kind of the way in. And then I think for a very long time, because it took quite a few years to put it together, and I think for a very long time I was trying to figure out, okay, well, or we were trying to figure out rather, like where is this going, and then I heard Minnie on a podcast talking about ideas that kind of seemed fairly self-evident, like the importance of self-worth and authenticity, and that was kind of when I thought, okay, I have to meet her and include her, and I think that's where it should end up, Do you want to talk about the first time we met? And I kind of said about what do you want to be in it, and because you were a little bit hesitant, weren't you, initially?
Yeah, until I was filming this documentary, I completely dissociated myself from the industry because I didn't want to be associated with any of this stuff that goes on. Some of these guys that are in jail currently, they use the same job title as me. So you have to be careful. And when someone says, "Can I interview you?" I don't know you don't really get the sense of that when you're watching the film, but I haven't seen the footage at the point when I'm being interviewed. You know, I'm talking about the industry. There has actually been, there's been backlash from some of the other pickup companies in it, as you mentioned before. I've also been trolled on social media a little bit for that.
How you came to...
Yeah, how we came to sort of... but I think we talked about it a lot in terms of, okay, if not, I think one of the things that you said, which I thought was very, very interesting, is there's no point making the documentary saying the pickup industry is shit. You know, you need to say something a bit more than that. You need to offer something like some kind of a solution or something a bit more hopeful.
Yes, that's why I wanted to be involved, because I think it's so easy to make a documentary that says, look at all this awful stuff that's going on. And I think this documentary goes so much deeper than that, to actually explore how complex it is and some of the much deeper reasons for its existence. You know, if you got rid of the entire pickup industry today, you haven't solved the problem at all, because the pickup industry is a side effect of much deeper problems in our society, where people, you know, enter adulthood completely clueless as to how to create connection with other people. They don't understand how to process their emotions properly. They don't have any confidence. They're terrified of rejection. And we need, if we want real change, it's not about shaming and blaming. Actually, it's not about going, I mean, that needs to happen. But if we want real change, we need to look at why it's happening and really try to understand with compassion what is sucking people into this industry in the first place. What's probably not that clear watching this is that the whole industry sort of supports itself. All the instructors were students themselves, so it feeds itself from the bottom with vulnerable people coming in, learning some tricks and then passing them on to other vulnerable people. So we need to look at why these people are vulnerable and look at the gaps in our schooling system and in our parenting styles that mean that people aren't getting the love they need to develop psychologically into secure human beings. That's the real issue.
Another aspect that was troubling to me about the film is, you know, there's the gender predatory dynamic that's going on, but there's also this preying on these lonely men, just sucking as much money out of them as possible. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, everybody in this system is vulnerable. The whole thing is sort of fueled by suffering and vulnerability, and it's, you know, you're teaching a system to teach people to kind of control that by developing a personality that's not really them, and that's actually making the problem worse, not better, for everybody involved, because in order to do that you have to detach more from who you really are to create this character, and that's being fueled by a fear that you're not good enough as you really are. So then you create this character, you reward that character because it gets girls, and it actually creates a positive feedback loop in the brain that actually reinforces that deep fear that you're not good enough in the first place. So you're actually making yourself worse. And that's really, really misunderstood. And you know, I spent my whole life just like trying to teach this and try to help people understand. And people can understand. It's actually very simple to explain it to people. So we're on a sort of mission to show people that there is another way.
I think also that's, I think pickup companies are very used to criticism, and the people that inhabit that world are also very used to being criticized by the mainstream media, whoever that is, or whoever they identify that as. And I think we really wanted to try and show the students as well, look, you are also being exploited here. Because I think maybe that might be the best way of sort of serving a wake-up call, make them actually think about their behavior and what they're involved in.
Interesting. I'm going to open it up to questions from the audience. Anyone have any?
It seems like there's a lot of overlap, or perhaps an evolution of this pickup culture of the students to what has now become a somewhat violent incel or involuntary celibate movement. And it sounds like you almost say that it's a symptom of it, these lonely guys. But how much of it would you say that this is actually a cause, that these guys are pushing the whole alpha and beta thing that then evolved into this violent online community?
Question of chicken and egg, which came first, the incels or the teaching of this type of stuff?
I mean, I say the whole thing is fueled by the same thing. It's all coming from loneliness and people not having the tools to deal with it in a better way. And because people didn't have the tools to deal with it in a better way, they've learned tricks to deal with it. It's not actually dealing with it. And then again, as I said, it's making things worse. So I think it's not so much chicken and egg as it just being the same thing. It's just a different branch of the same thing that's just this root of people being isolated and lonely and not having any real tools with how to deal with their situation. But you know, there are tools that you can learn.
Essentially a drug.
Yeah.
It's essentially a drug. That's what we found spending time with these people. What I kind of discovered was that these guys they're being rewarded, much like a drug would boost a certain chemical in the brain. So rather than treating the root cause or the problem, the illness, it's masking it. We lived with these guys for a while, and that's what I saw repeatedly, this pattern, which I didn't actually realise until we started making the documentary.
That's a great question, by the way. I mean, just to add to that, I think there's a bit of a revolving door between incels and the pickup community or group or subculture, or whatever, because there are people within the incel community that, you know, they subscribe to the pickup programs, they've been sold this dream of, and then they go on and they still don't find what they're looking for, which actually makes them even more embittered than they were previously. And there's a whole subculture of PUA hate, I think, was an online forum that used to talk, and it was people that had been to pickup companies that were very dissatisfied with their results or you know, kind of their experience. But that's a really interesting question.
Wanted to ask you a little bit more about your process of making this film. Seems like you got pretty intimate with some of these pickup artists. You got a very deep level of access. And surely on some level they must have known that you weren't going to paint in a very flattering light. So can you just talk a little bit more about how you engaged them, to explain this process to them?
The question is about how you engaged with the subjects and why they let you film them in flattering manner sometimes.
I think that's another great question, by the way. I think I've tried as much as possible to be fair. We have tried as much as possible to be fair to the subjects in this film and not misrepresent them. There were several instances with some of them where I said, look, if I put this in a documentary, people are going to go crazy. I just want you to understand that. You know, people are not going to react to this very well, because I felt that in some ways I had to, it would be a little bit irresponsible. I mean, there's a very odd dynamic. We probably don't have time to talk about it now, but there's a very odd dynamic between when you spend that much time with people. Of, you know, it is sometimes that we have tried to be fair, I think is the best way of saying it. And there were a few times I was very clear. One of them was Justin with the tattoos. And I said, look, if I put this in the documentary, people are not going to react well to that. I just need you to understand that. And I think the thing is, a lot of these their motivations are different. The most important thing to them is to be seen as the best at what they do. They don't really care what people think about them. They view that as kind of lesser beings. It's kind of classical sort of narcissistic. I hope that answers your question.
They're also so used to being rewarded for behaviour. I think you see some of that in the documentary, where because of this sort of cultish setup of the groups, you know, you see them in the film being racist and, you know, completely degrading women, and people laughing and applauding. And so they're so used to acting in an awful way and getting respect for it that I think they genuinely didn't really realise how it was going to come across to the general public, and they obviously do now, and that's why they're trying to, you know, file legal complaints to get it pulled.
Yeah, in their arrogance, what I find quite fascinating was that they didn't see that they weren't the best ever, so they had this blind belief. For example, one of the instructors wanted to be an actor, and we run a film company. He was like, oh, he was calling me up afterwards, you know, I'm going to be in your next film, doing this, right? I'm not not once did I offer a role or anything like that. And what was quite funny was he, I don't know what I should talk about here, but he believed that we were promoting it, or promoting his company and his image. Not once did we say we were. We just said we're making a documentary. So everyone would meet with him. He'd be like, "These guys making a documentary, they're promoting what we do." And we were like, look at me tonight. What are you talking about? Not once had we said that. But they just believe they are the best. Everyone wants to do everything for them. They are gods. And that's what's carrying through to the students. And that's what's ultimately so dangerous.
I think just a very final point on that is, we started filming this documentary in 2015. So this was before the Me Too movement and those kind of conversations around sexual harassment, and they weren't really in the public. They weren't really in the public sphere as much as they are now. So it was a different, yeah.
We have time for one more question.
Well, first, how are you sure that they were negging you the whole time? If they were telling making other people believe they're doing the movie just to go along with it, they probably don't care, because it is still promotion for them in some way. But my main question is, these classes couldn't have worked for most of these people. Like, they were showing these guys going around. Like, how do these seminars keep happening? Because most of these guys are probably not getting laid all the time from going to them. So how has there not been more backlash from the consumer to the product? Or like, that's what I was thinking the whole time, is like, there's no way that this is working for most of these guys.
So the question was, why isn't there more backlash from disgruntled customers?
I think the sales model is very clever. Firstly, the fact that the industry is quite underground helps that, because nobody wants to say that they've been on these courses. They're just going to remove any bad comments. They've got enough people who are going to say good things about them, and you know, the way that the businesses and the websites are set up is very salesy, and they are very good salesmen. You know, the whole thing is just advertising, really. It works in exactly the same way.
I think also there's something that really can't be underestimated is a lot of the people that come into this are very lonely and isolated. And this is something that I hope we explain, is that they find a sense of community, they find a sense of belonging in coming into this. It gives them, they have a common interest, and they sit around, and I mean, I've been with students, and they will sit around all day, and they will talk about tactics, and you know, as if discussing a video game, or as if discussing, it's a common interest. Yeah. So it gives them, and I think that's one of the interesting things is, as well as this, sometimes it becomes more about the community of men than it does the sort of the women that they're pursuing. I hope that answers your question.
Very fascinating. Thank you for sharing that with us, and thank you all for coming.
If you just want to, Giselle would like to make a very quick announcement, please.
Sure, definitely. Just real quick about talking about promotion as well with the documentary and promoting this industry. One of the things that Jen Lee, who started the Take Down Julian Blanc petition, specifically said was a catch-22 in her process, that it raised so much awareness of what he was doing. Obviously getting him kicked out of countries and banned and visas being revoked, but his popularity with the people from the RSP and pickup community massively increased. His sales went up, and there is a little bit of a catch-22 there. So with this film, we are looking to raise awareness. We're looking to facilitate change. Obviously, we need help from folks like yourself to do that. So if you will, please support us on social media. You can find us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at The Pickup Game Film, and you can review the film on IMDb. So thank you for coming.